hunted by demons, lost in time. Welcome to the First Crusade.
That is a pretty good tagline. And actually pretty accurate.
Not so much the demons part.
Well, no. I don't know, one of those characters is quite demonic.
Okay,
Doesn't
okay.
have to be hellfire and brimstone.
More like hunted by evil gods, but still, it's marginally accurate and quite an opener, if we must say so ourselves. Incorrect phrase there. Anyway, hello! We are Adventuresome Reviews.
Wishing you a happy day. And okay weekend. Because who needs great weekends?
And today, we are reviewing A Wind from the Wilderness.
By...
Suzzannah Rowntree.
Rowntree, not Rowntree?
I don't see an E before the W and the N, or between the W and the N.
Okay. I'm gonna have to trust you.
That's a highly suspect action, but I'll take it.
Anyway, you may continue reading this novel.
Oh yeah, I do after this still, don't I?
What did I even pay you for?
My good
You
books.
steal my intro ability. You don't do your job. You sit over there with
My
your
job is here.
long hair and your ears and your eyes and your
My
nose.
job
and your teeth,
is
like
to
you
look
belong
pretty
there.
and occasionally come up with marginally decent turns of phrase. Very charming, I must say so. Your job, obviously, is to hiss. Anyway, Syria, 636, as heretic invaders circle Jerusalem, young Lucas Bessarion vows to defend his people. Instead, disaster strikes. His family is ripped apart, his allies are slaughtered, and Lucas is hurled across the centuries to a future where his worst nightmare has come to pass. I'm probably doing this no benefit, seeing as I'm overhyping it all, but it's fun to read like that. Constantinople, 1097. I do not know how to read those years. Isla may be a heretic beggar, but she knows one thing for sure. 6 months from now, she will die. Before then, she must avenge her father's murder or risk losing her soul. Desperate to find their way home, Lucas and Isla join the 7 armies marching east to liberate Jerusalem. If Lucas succeeds in his quest, he will undo the invasion and change the course of history, but only as long as Isla never finds out who he really is. A time traveler from the ancient past.
I really enjoyed this book.
It was a great book.
The author does a great job of including the Crusade theme on multiple levels. There's one siege scene in the book that is just...
Oh, I was so gonna bring that up. So, we've delved a little bit into ancient sieges, my brother and I. And
very little. Like saying delved really oversells it. We know next to nothing. We just like to pretend we know stuff.
Yes, that's true. And so within the first couple chapters or so, you are hurled into this invasion, and it's like, oh, that is accurate, that is accurate. It was so immersive. From them storming up to the gates with a battering ram and having boiling oil poured onto the attackers, which is not historically accurate, but whatever, to the siege towers that are set alight, and oh, it was absolutely fantastic.
It felt hard. It felt dangerous. Usually when you're reading sieges, you're on the defender's side, and there's no effort given to like really letting the reader feel like what this is. This is one of the few books where you're on the offensive side, and you really get to feel how much of an advantage the defender has in these siege environments.
Because you have the main general of this particular invasion, and he's hiding behind the siege tower as his army is pushing it forward, and all around him he sees his men getting, porcupined with arrows, and
he's hearing messages from how other siege towers have collapsed or fallen, and it just feels like a monumental uphill battle. And they are massively favored. They have a huge army. And it was fun and really nice to see
And immersive.
how hard it was to actively try and storm a castle.
And this immersion is
Prevalent throughout.
in every battle. The author takes great pains to explain, or not to explain, but to thoroughly immerse you in the tactics of the time, because you have
Without really explaining them to you.
you can so you see, okay, you have a battle during the siege wherein the Turks come charge an assisting force of Turks come charging in, and they just barrel straight into this Crusader army, and they get smashed because their ponies are small, they're lightly armored because it's the desert, and they just get murdered by the Crusader knights, which are obviously heavily armored and mail and with these massive war horses. It's like, oh, the Crusaders have this in the bag. Next battle along, the Turks go, nah, they hang back 10 miles away, not quite, but, and it's basically just a day of a storm of arrows, and it's like, this just got a lot harder. And that is exactly how both battles went down, and it was fantastic. And because the fact that the Crusaders are heavily armored and the Turks have mounted archers is a consistent theme across all the Crusades.
Except for the Child Crusade.
Yeah, but that was more of a massacre.
Be factually accurate when you speak. You said all the Crusades.
Fine, whatever. And so just
And it goes beyond even just the battles. The whole concept of how the Roman emperor, whose name I'm forgetting, held all these armies hostage against their need to fulfill their vows, against his possession of the ships, what they needed to actually cross the ocean. I really enjoyed that entire dynamic.
Mm-hmm.
And
so about the a thought that just occurred to me that is not necessarily a misstep on the author's part, but it is something that I would have liked to see. Is the author doesn't tell you how the crusade got started at all, and this is relatively important because in the book, the armies just sort of kind of show up around Constantinople, or regardless, where the Greek emperor is currently housed, right? And he then holds them hostage until they swear their fealty in exchange for him ferrying them across the river into the Holy Lands
and supplying supplies
throughout the journey, right? However, what the book does not describe is that the entire crusade got started because this Greek emperor has been under attack by the Turks for a couple centuries now, and his empire has been slowly eroding under this constant pressure. So as the Turk and the Turk lands are slowly encroaching on his capital, he sends out a plea for aid to the other Christendom kingdoms, right? And the Pope, way off in France, says, all right, whoever agrees to go east and fight to reclaim the holy city, they shall have their redemption in heaven for whatever crimes they may have committed, right? And so this is what kickstarts a massive 7-nation army going down east, which is something the Greek emperor did not expect, which is why he swore them all to fealty. And so that is not explained in the book, which I feel is a marginally important detail just for the Crusades.
Yeah.
And it's not terribly necessary, but it's still just...
It would have been nice to get some more of that little backstory. I understand why it wasn't included, but at the same time, it was nice to know that. Continuing along the theme, though, is the concept of religion. And this is something that religion is almost always treated as you have the radical religious as the antagonists of a book. This is one of the few books I've read where the religion is a consistent, more positive theme, and I actually really enjoyed that. You have several truly faithful characters throughout the book, and their adherence to their faith is both strong character traits but also enjoyable. and how they try to serve it and uphold what they expect of ththemselves and what their God expects of them.
At the same time, while navigating the various mortal oaths they've taken, you have this one. So you have these 7 Frankish kings.
They're not all Franks. At least I don't think they're all Franks. I thought
They're basically European, Frankish, English. No, I think they're mostly Franks actually.
No, definitely have some Greeks there. You just spend most of the time in the Frank camp.
Okay, so you have these 7 generals, right? Most of which have come from European states, and you follow a primary general. This is a soft main character. He has a constant trouble navigating his duties as a lord, because this is a massive pilgrimage on top of crusade. So you have a bunch of people who are not fighters that this lord has to take care of, right? And so he has to constantly balance taking care of them, fighting a war, actually winning the war, while at the same time keeping peace and not breaking any oaths that he may have taken. And his narrative was exceedingly interesting, much like the entire book was.
And there's intercamp conflicts and a little bit of politicking, and it's just
all the generals are powerful men, so none of them want to bow to the other. And so you have this. It's kind of forgotten about halfway through, but it does rear its head later on. They do not manage to pick a chief general, which is a bit of a military disaster.
And all of this, and so all of that, we haven't even gotten to the main characters yet. And it just goes to show how, because all that various details, it's really well integrated, all these various different stories.
There's not a single time in the book where the author says, here, information dump, this is what's going on, yada yada. It all takes place in organic, actual conflicts. You learn about the entire salvation of the soul through the one Frankish general I talked about, thinking about it in his mind. I'm here to save my soul. I cannot risk being bogged down with petty gripes or anything like this, or in discussions with other generals as they discuss and contend with one another. It is exceedingly well handled.
And then you have the main characters. And I really liked Isla more than, I forget the male, what's the male?
Lucas Bessarion.
I should have remembered that, because I really like the name Bessarion.
Mm-hmm.
But Isla's story starts out excellently and goes excellently throughout the entire. And they interact really well. They have individual motivations that are in conflict. And you understand the conflict, and it is really well structured. And then Lucas Bessarion and both these characters are very actively likable in their own ways.
Lucas Bessarion is exceedingly well written, because he is not a character who's straight up likable, but you like him anyway. And he's not dislikable in the way that he's evil or a jerk. He's dislikable in the way that he comes from nobility, so he has this extreme arrogance to him. That is a constant plague to him throughout the story, and
it slowly gets ground down and out.
But at the same time, he never gets rid of it entirely, and it comes to hurt him in the story consistently. It's a lesson he cannot learn, and that is fantastic.
But it's also counterbalanced that he's actively a faithful and well-meaning individual. He wants to serve, quote-unquote, humanity and do what's right and maintain, and he actively tries to maintain a standard of honor that is well beyond what most people in the book even pretend to. And that's part of one of the reasons that you like him, is because
he is an honorable character, which is a character trait that can smooth out so many wrinkles in someone.
But he's not just honorable on a superficial level. He's not just said honorable. He is proven to be honorable several times, including when it costs him. And then Isla's constantly aware that she's going to die. In 6 months, that's constantly...
This is a great character motivation. And it takes the entire book for her to break through some things that are keeping her, I'm going to say, trapped. Though that's deeply inaccurate. She's culturally trapped. That's slightly more accurate. And you fully understand every decision she makes. It is a fantastically built character. So, and obviously you have her relationship with Lucas, and this is in itself built fantastically from step one.
Absolutely fantastically.
Because the very first interaction is she steps off a boat and a bunch of ruffians decide to mug her for whatever reason. She's disguised as a boy, so she is just like mugging her, right? Stealing her.
And she's not scared, per se, because she knows she's not going to die here.
Right, and that's in itself, that's a constant refrain in her mind. It's like, it's not 6 months, I'm practically immortal.
It's also the author actively, tangibly using a plot point to benefit the story, and usually you have somebody's going to die, or the world's going to end in tragedy, or we're going to lose. That's often a beginning plot point for stories, that we're going to lose, or tragedy is going to be struck, or how did the world end? That's constantly the starting point, and then it's almost entirely forgotten. It is rarely as effectively used or as consistently mentioned as in this book.
And so Isla dying in 6 months gives her a very brash confidence at times, which you understand, but others may sacrifice a sense of danger by having this 6 month death time because she's not going to die until then. But no, Isla constantly has constantly reminds herself that just because I won't die does not mean bad things cannot happen, right? And so this keeps a sense of threat for her narrative, which is obviously just really necessary. But anyway, back to the very first engagement. Isla steps off a boat and gets mugged, and Lucas Bessarion accidentally saves her life almost. He asks for directions, and then he starts getting mugged, and as she runs off and escapes, only to come back and save his ass. So that's a really nice, just one kind of a bit of a turn on things, because he's not being heroic here. He's just kind of accidentally saved her life, which then turns into her saving his life. But then 3 chapters down the line, he returns the favor, and this, once again, just builds a really nice relationship between them of trust and equal
value or competence. And there's other levels to their relationship as well, because they're on opposite sides. She's a Turk, he's a Christian. And that really comes into play as the story goes along, as they're traveling with crusades, and she's trying to help the Turks, the Turkish or Islamic cities that are coming besieged. And it just creates, but at the same time, they still throughout all this, they still like each other as friends.
And they remain friends, and it's actually an eye-opening experience to Lucas, who gradually starts seeing that the Turks are not the enemy, or it's like they're his enemy, but they're not evil. They're just people like himself serving a different god, and he becomes he stops seeing them as other, per se, which is the best way to describe it. They're still his enemies, and he still fights against them, but he has that understanding that religion is, that kind of, he crosses that religious divide of, different religions, yada, yada, yada. I hope you understand what I'm talking about here.
We did.
Good.
Then there's the magic system. Very soft magic system and very sparsely used.
But perfect for the book, because this is a historical novel, so you don't necessarily want people running around chucking fireballs.
Or summoning dragons, but still is very effectively used, very pleasing, and suitably effective.
And you also have the synopsis mentioned that Lucas has a secret, and he must keep it from Isla or risk doom and death. And both the secret picked and the reason why he decides to keep it from Isla, you understand the secret keeping perfectly, and it is a very necessary secret to keep. He comes from a Christian organization called the Watchers, right? Which is basically people who attend to the moral standing of the citizen. They say what is right and what is wrong, and they protect their souls from evil demonic forces through prayer and whatnot. That was 1,000 years, not 1,000 years, that was 300 years ago. In Isla's time, her family was killed by Watchers. So Lucas cannot tell her, and Isla has this, kind of this I must kill the Watchers and save my people vibe going on. And that is a wonderful character dynamic that secrets must be kept for. In his time, the Watchers are good, and in her time, the Watchers are good-ish.
You still have like the conflict.
You still have the corruption of
non-religious religious people, non-faithful or self-serving religious people.
And in her time, the Watchers have fallen. Not entirely because they don't really come in too much.
I have one criticism I have for the book is that I found the ending a little unsatisfying. Both from Isla's story.
I wouldn't want Isla's story to end kind of any other way though.
A little bit from that, but mostly for Lucas's, and I just found it unsatisfying the way it ended because they set up a story that's going to end in a couple of different places. They throw a great final conflict for that ending, and then it just feels like they don't really commit to either ending.
It's a little hard for me to we're dancing around the issue so much that I'm struggling a little to properly grasp and what exactly you're insinuating. But I did not have any problems with the ending. I'd actually say I kind of like the ending because it didn't necessarily end on a massive battle, which thinking back over it, I find slightly refreshing. There's no.
I didn't even necessarily want it to end on a massive battle. It's just it ends. Yeah, I found it ever so slightly unsatisfying. Like the conclusion it came to is one that I figured that was going to be the conclusion, but it almost feels like Lucas, instead of actively making that choice, more wandered into it.
You talking where?
At the very, very end.
Where he means, what's his name?
Yeah. And
I actually really liked that scene.
I like the interaction, but again, it leaves Lucas so in between everything.
Okay, I see. He kind of didn't make a decision there, did he?
Yeah, and so I found that underwhelming and unsatisfying. And there's other books in the series, but the next book doesn't feature Lucas.
Are you talking about how it deals with his family?
Yeah.
That's an offshoot. Book 2 does deal with Lucas. Pretty sure it does. Anyway.
We have the second book upstairs.
So you read the synopsis of that one?
Yeah.
Okay.
So I imagine they're probably all going to come together at some point, but it was still just... Again, I didn't find the ending particularly satisfying.
That's the same. I was not too terribly bothered by the ending. Now that he mentions it, I may give him like a solitary point in that regard, but elsewise, I found the end quite.
The only thing that's left for me to really say that the prose is excellent.
Let's put it like this. From chapter 1, there was not a single chapter where the book got slow while not being breakneck paced throughout. It was a fantastically paced book throughout. There was no scenes that were boring or unnecessary. Character, just dynamics were
excellently paced, excellently structured, excellently written
throughout. It's probably one of the closest books we'll have to being worth 5 stars, which we're not going to give it because we're evil. Yay!
I'd probably give the book about 4.5 stars.
I would give the book 4.5 stars too. It's the closest book we have to a must-read.
I would have given Sword of Kagan more of a must-read.
Oh, but it's like Sword of Kagan was such a depressing book. It's not for everyone. Whereas like this one, it is not depressing. It's not overly depressing. It's not overly dark. It has a beautiful mix of tones and humor. It's just a very general, just everything sort of book.
You may say whatever you want to say. Just know that you are wrong. I disagree with you wholeheartedly on every subject.
Okay, I'll take that, I guess.
I think that's it.
I think that's it too.
Then we shall bid thee adieu, our most erstwhile and duplicitous, adoring fans and listeners.
Fare thee well, our future friends. Shall we?